we can get started without him. Uh, take some notes here. So thank you everybody for calling in. And first off, I want to say that this meeting, unfortunately, is not truly a meeting. And I say that because there was an issue with the posting of the meeting notice today, such that it was not put out on the town calendar and webpage within 48 hours. So unfortunately, the public is not able to attend, and we are probably violating open meeting law, but I hope not. Regardless, I felt that we needed to just move this meeting along and have this meeting today. So we won't be taking notes. Carol, don't worry about notes or minutes because this meeting never took place. But again, we need to move this along. We can't wait any longer. We can't have any more issues administratively here. We need to tackle some of these things. Given that we will not be voting on anything today, we will not go into heavy deliberations so that we don't violate the open meeting law. But this meeting is going to be informally going on. I'll try and share as much information as I can and look at this as an information sharing. And it looks like maybe Brian's in on the gonna come in here with the town of Cohasset. So all that being said, Carol, is that you, the town of Cohasset?
Yes, that's me.
All right. Again, no note taking today because this meeting never occurred. All right, so just a couple of things. Oaths of swearing in, Bob. I know that you got an email as well. You and Bill. I don't know if you had a chance to get down to town hall today to get sworn in.
I did do that this morning. Yes.
Great, awesome. Okay, so we're just waiting for Bill to get sworn in officially to be part of the committee. There was an email that went out from the town clerk, Liza, as well yesterday about conflict of interest and ethics training that everybody needs to take. There was a link that was sent out. You need to also take that. I think it's about an hour long. It's actually pretty interesting, although I say it's boring and interesting at the same time. I did get a few things out of it. I know we've been through this a few times. But please take that if you are one of the people who haven't done that training to date. I also sent out to everybody as another reminder the sidewalk charge. And, we've only had 2 formal meetings to date. And both of those meetings were kind of just getting our feet wet, understanding our responsibilities, what we're up against. But reviewing the sidewalk charge is really something that we need to keep in mind and understanding, among many other things. One of our main responsibilities here is prioritizing the roadway list that I also sent out and coming up with strong recommendations to the select board at a future date, which we probably should talk about as well, about moving forward. Okay, we've been giving a charge to basically I wouldn't want to say throw away the DPW plan, but take a solid look at the DPW plan and say, what roads are really our priority in the town these days? And we have the plan that I also forwarded out to you for FY 2023, 24, 25, and beyond. And there's been a lot of talk about other roads in town that may be on the 24 or 25 list that should be moved up. There are still, and I wish we had Brian here to chime in, we still have some uncertainties on some of the roads in the FY 2023 plan. Elm Street, which I'll get to in a few minutes, Beechwood, which is under heavy construction now. And some of the questions that I personally have are those ready to go in the next couple of months? Because we're in New England, we only have a short season. We can't pave in November, December, January, February. So if we can't get that done by, I'll just throw it October timeframe, then if some of those projects get pushed forward or pushed back, we need to bring up a couple projects. And one of the other projects that comes to mind, what I keep hearing, is Church Street up by Beechwood. And it's a small little patch. I did go down that road, not on a daily basis, but at least a couple times a week to go to some sporting event in Norwell or out that way. And I get a chuckle when you see the Situate Cohasset line and the road is nicely paved in Situate, and it just turns to shit when it gets to Cohasset and it's bumpity, bumpity, bumpy. And anyone who's driving that road is saying to themselves, what is wrong with Cohasset? Like they can't they pave the road? So, putting a little plug in there as we start to think about this without heavy deliberation, Church Street, that little stretch, could come into play. And I'll get to you in a second, Ralph. I know there's a lot, and like with everything else, there's a lot of moving parts when we start to prioritize things because we have the Beechwood store over in that area. And personally, I don't really know what the construction status is. We may not want to, even though the area needs it, you have to think about not so much prioritizing an area where there's heavy construction, but I think the Church Street up the back there is an area that certainly we could tackle. And Ralph, I'll let you chime in here. Go ahead.
Okay, well, this is fresh off the press. Okay, this came from Brian. It was a request from me to Brian asking really, what is the status of the T.L. Edwards quotes on the various roads that they've actually quoted. Okay, so this is what he said. This came in at 11:29. It's on my text. Okay, he says Lenny is the representative for T.L. Edwards. Okay, he says Lenny is still working on figures for Elm. I informed him we need budget figures for grant proposals and to focus on that. Unrelated, we have moved up Church and Doan and will be paving prior to June 30. So
prior to June 30th.
Prior to June 30.
Okay.
So I'm delighted it's happening. I mean, I really am. But it's sort of interesting. It happened like, wow. That's all I can say.
Well, yeah, and that's good. And I've been making a few phone calls to people behind the scenes as well to try and, get things moved up. And I know we've got Paul Grady here. Thank you, Paul, from the select board member who's taking the heat on some of the stuff as well. To me, this is like this. It's low hanging fruit that it needs to be addressed, and call it whatever you want. If it satisfies some citizens or whatever the verbiage you want to use, these roadways need to be further looked at and explored, and they need to be taken care of immediately. So that is good news, and I don't think that's going to kill our budget either. Paul.
I'm sorry because I'm on my phone. I'm not showing my
No, you're all good.
Hand raised, so I apologize for that. Ralph, that's fantastic news. I heard something similar yesterday. Now, just as being on the select board, so we get posts on that. That I'm asking you, Jay, and I'm asking everyone, are we allowed to maybe put that out there and announce it that we got some good news here? Maybe we have to wait for Brian for that. That Church Street is going to be paved, and are we just doing the back part, Ralph? Do we know? Because heading down towards Doan, we do have that construction going on. I don't know. I think the heavy stuff is done. I think they're more on the internal side and externally fixing up the building. But I think any of the quote unquote blasting or anything like that stuff is primarily done. But can we announce the fact that we are doing Church Street, say on our 143 or on the town webpage? We can get Justin to do that. So I'm just asking.
What I'd suggest.
That would be.
Okay, I was going to say quick, Paul. I'd suggest that we wait for the specifics from Brian, because usually the specifics would say, we're paving from this address to that address. In other words, we get a very specific idea of, what the extent of the paving is. Since he mentions both Doan and Church, I mean, the way Doan works is Doan runs all the way to Wampatuck State Park, and then it comes back up, and it's the road we usually take adjacent to Beechwood Ballpark. That's Doan. And then, of course, on the other side just going a little bit further west is Church. So he says both Doan and Church. So you need some specifics. Otherwise, we'll post something that people will think is complete, and maybe it's not. So we need to know addresses.
Fair enough.
Where. Yeah, right.
I will say this.
I'm happy to.
I do.
Go ahead, Paul.
It's just one last thing, and then I know what's important to me. This sounds completely selfish, but it's on behalf of this committee. I want this committee to get credit for this. So that's. No, I'm serious.
That's nice of you.
No, I think that the committee. So I'm open to say, Jay, you make an announcement or a post, or Ralph, as chair and co-chair, and it's just a suggestion from me. I'm not making
Yeah.
a demand. But this committee is working hard, and if we're restructuring and moving some things, and thanks to Brian, of course. But my thing is, on the genesis of this committee is to show people that we're going to get something done. So if I would ask this, if it's coming from the committee, I'd like to see, if I could, it coming from either one of you two as the chair and vice chair.
Should be
That's
Jay.
what I would.
Should be
Yeah,
Jay.
happy to do that. I think, and so let me just, to Ralph's point, which was a great one, let me just, because I know we've all been talking behind the scenes here. Let's get an exact point A to point B location of each one of these streets and a little bit more of a time frame. And I'm happy to send a note to the select board, as well as throw a posting on the on 143 on behalf of the sidewalk committee that these upcoming roadways will be done, blah, blah, blah. So happy to do that. Let's just get a little bit more specifics from Brian and time frame, and I'll take care of that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So so since we're on it again, I really want this committee and everyone here to be more vocal. Speak your mind. Look at that paving list. The reason that we're all on this committee is because we all represent different parts of town. I'm over in North Cohasset. We've got Village people. We've got Beechwood, if that the Beechwood area. We've got King Street area. We've got Harbor area. We've got people all over the town, and it's fantastic. It's diverse. It's the way it should be. So when you drive these roads, if you drive down a road every day and say to yourself, my God, why hasn't the town paved this road? This road looks like shit. Or why don't we have a sidewalk here? Look at the paving plan and see if it's on the paving plan for in the near future, and highlight that and bring it to our attention, and create your own prioritization list and sidewalk list so that we cannot really deliberate today. So think about that internally, and let's really kind of hone in on the areas that really need that. And to talk about some monies, right now we have let me pull it up here, 1.1, I had let me do a quick screen share here if I can. Oh, let's do the entire screen. You see my screen now?
Yep.
Yeah. So I got this from Brian. This was revised a couple weeks ago. It looks like in the budget for right now, we have about $1.18 million from, as you can see, multiple different sources here in order to get the paving done. And unfortunately, the paving plan, if I have it here, if we were to do everything in 2023 as proposed currently or previously proposed, is about $2 million. So again, please everyone, go back and look at some of these areas. Here's Church Street here. If there are these areas in town that you feel really need to be bumped up, then let's bump them up, okay? So come to the next meeting, we'll talk more about that as well. Now,
Jay,
yes.
Jay, I'm sorry. Brian's gonna hop on.
All right, great.
Jake,
Go ahead,
I'm just
Sorry,
curious, I feel like last time we did that and it kind of went around in a circle and we got a lot of reasons why nothing can be paved, whether it was budget, whether it's not a priority or anything else. How do we get past all of that? If we actually want to move things forward.
Yeah.
So
I go back to look at that charge, read the charge again. And the charge specifically states prioritization and making recommendations to the select board. And I've talked to Paul a little bit about getting on an upcoming agenda. I don't have anything to present to the select board other than, if we had the new news about Church and Doan, other than we're talking, we've only had 2 meetings, we're working through it. I'd like to think that after the next meeting, we have a little bit more of a list. So that's why I say, like, let's go, everybody. Let's start getting going on that. And great point. So we get in front of the select board, we make those recommendations, and the select board tells DPW how to get it done. And Paul, is that your course of action? Is that how you recommend us to move forward as well?
Yes, and I do recommend getting in front of the select board as often as we can, but I'm also looking at this charge is designed. So this committee has quite a bit of juice. And those things will be rearranged, Tori, just so you know, is coming up. Like Jay said, I would highly encourage looking at the list. You see priorities, like we've just, you may not have been on, is Church Street just got moved up. You know, we all look at that, and a number of us have heard about Church Street, the back end and everything like that. And as someone who drives it every day, taking my daughter to swim practice, yes. And so we are rearranging it. There was some good news brought out today. So yeah, the select board is going to be very amenable to what this board recommends. I'm, you know, and I'm not speaking for them. I'm speaking for myself. But we wouldn't have created it if I didn't feel that way.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, Brian. We were just recently, well, as of a couple minutes ago, heard about the Church Street and Doan Street being moved up here. The news on that. So maybe you could shed a little light on that a little bit as far as this new development here on paving plans for Church Street and Doan, timing and location, and if that's fake news or real news.
Oh, it's real news. It's good news. So
Right.
And
we're happy about that.
Yeah. So I mean, you've all, or those of you who've driven that way, that road has been degraded significantly over the past winter. I'd say more than any other road, and it's one of only 5 points that you enter the town of Cohasset. So it's a significant commuter and for residents to get in and out of town. We were awarded a WRP grant from Mass DOT. It's a winter rapid recovery grant for $110,000. So we decided to use that for a mill and overlay, mill and level course of that area. So if you're driving down Beechwood Street.
When you say mill and overlay, is that basically a scrape and repave?
Yeah, so you mill off the top layer and then raise and reset your castings, and then a level course. Now, there could be a top course on top of that added later on, but at any rate, it'll be a smooth, drivable new surface with the mill and level top course. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just is that so? That 110,000, is that outside of the other monies that
it's outside of the other monies, and it needs to be spent by June 30th. So the decision is they're going with it. The cost of that treatment for what we're doing as you take the left from Beechwood onto Doan, right in that area, all the way to the second line. So it's a piece of Doan.
Yeah, I just want to get the exact location, because we were talking previously about making an announcement on the town webpage, etc. I'm sure you're going to do it as well, and maybe you've already started to draft the language and have the locations. But well, let me ask you: do you already have like a release coming up about this?
No, we typically get it when we get the schedule. So
right.
I think we talked about it before. TL Edwards, we share with 11 other communities, and everybody is, because of the late award of the contract with the bid protest, everybody's scrambling to get on their schedule. So we received this quote, we gave them an immediate notice, proceed, get it done before June 30th so we can expend $110,000 per the grant.
So what are the locations exactly now?
So
where is it gonna start at the town line?
From the town line, which is Church Street. So pretend you're driving into town from Situate, from the town line on Church Street, and then at the fork in the road, you take a right going towards the ball field.
Yeah.
That turns into Doan Street until you get to the stop line at Beechwood. So that's the limits, town line to the stop line at Beechwood. So it's a piece of Doan, not all of Doan, and a piece
Yep.
of Church, not all of Church.
To the stop sign at the ballpark,
Correct.
right in front of the old store.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, can I ask a question, Jay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so Brian, is it the V where it veers off and goes by the ball field and goes straight down to the New Country store?
No, it's the way you would drive into town to go to Beechwood Street. So it's a piece of Church until you get to the V, and then you take,
Yeah.
if you're driving from Situate, take that right, that turns into Doan at the V.
Yeah.
And then you follow that with the ball field on your side and the backstop.
Yep.
So it's that piece. It's the high traffic area. So
Okay.
Yeah.
the piece of Church, that goes down towards straight ahead on Beechwood, that'll be done later on, probably likely with the Beechwood intersection and maybe when Doan Street gets paved. But we're just trying to get the high traffic, high volume, worst road.
Yep.
We've had a few claims on tire damage and such.
I can tell you this, that's going to answer a lot of complaints, so thank you.
Yeah. Right.
And do we have, like I said, if Jay was able to come out with an announcement, just shows that the committee's doing what the committee said they were going to do. Do we have a date, like a start date? I know you said for June 30th. And then you come out with your DPW.
As soon, yeah, I mean, I think I started saying, so the schedule on TL Edwards, unfortunately, getting a schedule from them before a few days before they start is tough. We've given them notice to start as soon as possible. So I would, if you were doing the announcement, I would say within the next 4 weeks. And part of that is going to be,
just say by June 30th.
yeah, I mean, well, I would
Yeah.
say that, in the next few weeks, there'll be activity out there. And prior to this, so I just had the Beechwood water main meeting. That's why I was late. Sorry. The part of this is we need to do a couple of just covers for the water main. So there'll be activity out there to do, some stems and some rounded off gate box nuts that prior to TL Edwards coming in. So if you make the announcement now, you could say there'll be road work completed within the next month for that.
There you go, Jay.
Great. Fantastic. Well, that is great news.
That is good news.
Ralph, see your
Yeah, just
raised
a
hand.
quick question. Will you try to do an overlay on that short piece of sidewalk on the Church side? Will you try to do an overlay there at the same time, Brian, do you think, or not? Can't we afford doing that?
So we don't have the money to do that. I mean, we could ask them to do that. I think it would be a lot more money. So the piece we're talking about for just the road surface is 139,000. So let's say 140. The money we have for grant is 110. So we're spending 30 of our own funding out of the funds we talked about before.
Okay.
I'd say the sidewalk there. I'd prefer to do that at a later time, what kind of when we vet, is it ADA compliant? I can think of it in my mind's eye, but I can't really tell, is it fully compliant? And maybe, we could do it with the remainder of Church Street when that gets done, or, when this sidewalk committee decides on what's the priority for sidewalk.
Okay.
Well, I'm trying to, I'm not I'm familiar with the road, but I'm not familiar with the sidewalk. I'm trying to look it up online. But I think another thing is, one of the things you run up against here is, hey, we've got some, free money for all intents and purposes. Let's just get it done. Let's spend the money. Let's get the roadway done. And we have to come back and revisit the sidewalk at a later time to make it ADA compliant and all that. Then let's do that. It's probably going to hold everything up with the design. So that makes sense to me. Okay. So the one other thing before I want to talk about this one-step grant, Brian, it doesn't sound like TL Edwards has the cost estimates back for the 2023 or even 2024 paving plans yet. And when do you think we could expect that back?
So I spoke with him this morning, and he's so there's one gentleman who does the estimates and rides all the roads for Edwards, Lenny Stewart, and Ralph and Mike Sardina and I met with him a couple weeks ago. And he's working on estimates for all of the 11 communities and trying to get their RAP funds done prior to June 30th. So he has not gotten the estimate, say, on the Elm Street sidewalk. I told him that we want, you know, if he could make that a focus point, because we need at least a budgetary estimate to help with the grant proposal.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the other estimates, I think I've received the piece for Cushing and Smith, margin I'll need to check, but we don't have the full road list that we've been discussing.
Could you send that to me?
Yeah, anything
Please.
I have, I'll send along.
All right, thank you. And otherwise, we would be kind of just going off of the paving plan, the road paving plan for the next 10 years and those rough estimates. I'd be interested to see what the real quote is versus what the estimate was. I'm hoping it's the same, if not lesser than that, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think the same. I think it will be less.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
More for Brian, but also for you, Jay, and for the whole committee, is we got to start thinking about, because we do, and I've heard some figures, we want to step up. Brian, what do you think is a reasonable, acceptable budget going forward that we should present at some point to the select board? And that's something that's going to be, you know, making your process, I suppose, easier. And then we know what we have to work with. So we present that. They'll be looking for that as part of the long-term financial plan, because after that, we want to come up with, say, a maintenance plan down the road, which I think will probably decrease costs. Brian, maybe I'm wrong. But once we get done what we have to get done, but we've got to present that so we can look into stabilization funds and things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, going forward. So for 24, 25, and 26, do you see what I'm getting at?
yeah. So the estimate I put forth is, you know, and it's a rough estimate, is $1 million a year. But on the maintenance part of it, that includes maintenance. So our current funding is, we do maintenance as well in that, and I'm getting a list together of streets that we should do crack seal, which we've done annually. So we'll be doing also crack sealing, probably $50,000 to $75,000 worth out of road funding for the roads that are not on that road assessment report you got. Nothing that's major rehabilitation, but things that are minor. You can, you know, to your point, you extend the lifespan of those by sealing up the cracks. So we do that, and we will do some of that this summer with road funds. So it's
yeah. My suggestion is make it comfortable for you. You know, what's the worst that can happen? And we get some roads done, and that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I mean, comfortable. $2 million to be comfortable. I just don't know if it's feasible.
Yeah.
You know, $1 million. So right now we have a little over $1 million to do the roads that we have, and it's just there, maybe not enough, you know. So is $1 million comfortable? No, I'd say it's probably realistic. $1.5 million would be more comfortable. $2 million would be, you know, I think we could.
I'm just thinking that if you put it in and we explain it as a committee and a group, and I think that instead of coming back to the well and looking, well, we could have, but we're not financed. You know, we're trying to do this, is look at all the expenditures. I'm throwing some free advice out there. What's the worst that can happen?
So Ralph, let me get to you in a second, Ralph. I just want to jump in here and just go back to the screen. And as you know, we kind of talk about the reality and numbers moving forward. Again, this is was a proposed plan that's probably a couple of years old now. If you look at 2023, the proposal to do all that work was $2 million, and 2024 is 1.5, and 2025 you can read is 2.2. From there, it significantly drops off a little bit, so you're less than $1 million. However, it's really hard to forecast what the roadway is going to look like in 2030, 2031, and in 2032. And also, in the meantime, we haven't even talked about the sidewalks and the creation of sidewalks, et cetera. So I think that would be a fair number to go at. And I certainly want to revisit and jump back to this grant application and spend some time on that. But Ralph, I see a hand raised.
Okay. I wanted to provide some clarity, at least in my own mind, about how to think about all of this. And let me start by saying that if you say that we have like 37 miles of roads, okay, and that we want to actually repave these things every 20 years, you're really talking about approximately $2 million, sorry, $1 million a year, because it costs about, I think, and Brian, you can jump in, it's about $500,000 to do a mile of road with a road width of 24 feet. So if you figure that out, you need $1 million, does you 2 miles of road. So every 20 years you replaced it. So there's a replacement cost, which is about $1 million a year. That's the basic replacement cost. It's not talking about sidewalks. The town should be supporting that. That's my view, and it should be done out of operating budget. That makes sense. The money that has to come out of whatever additional budget that would be created as a stabilization fund really should be for things that are not on a maintenance basis. So I'm just trying to get my head around what is it that we in fact have to spend per year just to do maintenance, and what do we have to spend to do separately the either overlay of sidewalks and or reconstruction of or construction of new sidewalks, so that we have some constructive way to look at this whole thing, but not confuse the two things. They're very different things as I see it. So anyway, that's only for clarification, but it also helps if you can say, we know that it's going to cost $1 million a year to do 2 miles of roads. I mean, that helps a lot to understand what we're doing. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
All right. Good point and good question. I can't answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, just to follow that, I think you're right. There's, you have maintenance, which should be, by definition, go under operating budget, but the cost of some of the maintenance, like the crack sealing, say, for several miles of road is beyond what that budget figure is. So things like we have storm drains, we have line striping, we have those types of lines in our budget line, but it certainly won't do the amount we need to do with our paving program. So, I think if we wanted to put those maintenance items like crack sealing, line striping, catch basin, we'd have to significantly increase the DPW operating budget line prices. Right now, we're kind of capturing those big ticket items under the road funds. So in road funds, I see, road isn't just paving. I see it as road is everything that's pertinent to make a roadway work. It could be a guardrail, could be a catch basin. It might be a storm drain that sheds the water off of it. So it's any kind of utility that makes that, or piece of it that makes it function. And we've been capturing those kind of costs under the road funding.
Okay.
And just the one other thought I had, another win, I would think, if we could pull it off, Brian, would be to get a repair of North Main Street, where the gas main has really made a mess of North Main Street. Is it possible to do that minimal grind and repave in that area in the time frame of the 2023 year?
Yes. So National Grid, and if we haven't talked about it before, so the rules we work with on National Grid is, let me back up. So we have a road protection plan. When we pave a road, we have a basically 10-year protection plan on it, a 5-year strict moratorium. You can't dig in the road. And then from year 6 to 10, it's a prepayment to, a early opening fee. National Grid, a lot of their, if they have a main work, it's longitudinal works like North Main Street, straight down the street. If the road is less, the rules we have with them, if the road is less than 10 years old, so within our kind of our protection plan parameters, we require them to do a mill and overlay of the entire curb to curb surface. If it's more than 10 years, which is in the case of North Main Street, we require them to do a mill and overlay of the trench, which really cleans it up. So that piece out there is scheduled for a mill and overlay by National Grid with their own crews and their own money hopefully within the next month.
Okay.
We
That's
we
important.
don't require them to do it right away, and it sucks for driving on, but you want a settlement period, which we've had
Yeah.
this past winter. And once you're over that 90 to more months, 90 days to several months, then it's good to do a mill and overlay. So we've requested that, and hopefully they'll do it in the next month.
All right, so if I'm hearing you correctly, Ryan, and I'd like to know there from point A to point B on that, North Main Street, dealing with another issue on another company. National Grid is on the hook to do a mill and overlay of that area that they have disturbed.
Just the trench,
Just the trench itself,
yes,
not the road.
not the road. So
Because it's old, because it's been older over the 10-year period.
correct.
All
So
right.
ones that would be within the 10-year period, and this is kind of where we may have more money to play with. Pond Street, Pond Street was paved, and they had to increase the size of that main because of increased gas demand in town. That was less than 10 years. They are providing us a check for a full curb to curb overlay. But if you drive Pond Street, the only bad part of it is where their trench is. So maybe we use half of the money and do that one lane. I'm just throwing ideas out there.
Yeah.
And then maybe use the rest of that money for, other needs. Beechwood is another area that was less than 10 years.
Right. Okay. All right. Good to know. So let me just jump back and talk a little bit about this grant. At the last meeting, we were individually asked to kind of kick the curve a little bit and see if there are any funding opportunities to supplement this, the town budget. And I learned, as a result of that, I learned that there was this one-stop grant application through the state of Massachusetts, which is basically federal money handed down to the state of Massachusetts. Nevertheless, we're behind the 8 ball a little bit because the grant application is due by close of business. I think it's June 2nd, which I believe is like next Friday night, give or take. And so I said, yeah, I can fill that out. And when I looked at the grant application, it's not so much as name, address, and phone number. It is quite lengthy and quite extensive. So looking back in FY 2022, just to tell you how many people actually got monies, there were $231 million was allocated across, I think it was 100 and something communities last year. So the average project, might have been a little bit more communities. The average project, or the average grant, was about $600,000. And these grants could be used for all sorts of public infrastructure. So I looked at to see how roadway infrastructure would fit in there, and it checks all of the boxes. In fact, it's a perfect project for what they're looking for. And so they want a description of the project, timing, why the project is needed, who does it benefit, and they're not looking for one-word answers. So I reached out to Ralph and Brian to kind of help me out with that. And my first thought was to put the application in under the Sidewalk Committee, and I've talked to Montana, our grants and resiliency coordinator with the town of Cohasset, and she kind of held my hand through it a little bit. And what she had recommended is to put it in under the town of Cohasset on behalf of the Sidewalk Committee on behalf of the town of Cohasset to talk about improvements to infrastructure. And I thought that the first heavy focus would be on Elm Street. And although it would be encompassing, it would really be focused towards Elm Street. And I know Mike Sardina, who was on one of the previous calls, has been helping out in providing some narrative language. So I'm taking some of that, incorporated in there. Now, since the grant is due June 2nd, I don't know. I am going to get it done. 100%, I'll get it done. I have some follow-up questions for this group, but we still, hopefully, Brian, may meet by early next week. We need to have some cost numbers there that would really help out with the grant, because they want cost estimates, etc. There's no, like anything else, there's no guarantee that you're actually going to get the grant. But I'd like to be optimistic, but again, there's no guarantee. Many other communities have taken advantage of this. The downfall is that they're not going to award the grant until October, after October 2023. And so construction wouldn't start until FY 2024. If Elm Street were to be awarded, we couldn't, so here's the thing. And I don't even know where Elm Street stands because we don't have the budget in place yet. There seem to be a lot of moving parts with Elm Street. I am 100% personally, I'm only one voice, I'm 100% supportive of Elm Street getting done. I liked the plan that Mike had come forward with. I don't know that I know a few of you were on the call when you saw the plan. Ralph, I don't know if Mike's ready to share that plan cast a broader net with that and see if he can include other people with that plan. I know that a lot of people haven't seen it, but personally, I was supportive of it. We would include that plan in the grant application. So my first heavy focus is a grant application for Elm Street and getting that forward. And I'm probably halfway there with that grant application. Thinking about that, I said to myself, well, why don't we do something more town-wide? So the question I had to myself was, and not to deliberate here, but to ask amongst you if you want to get back to me separately, is whether or not to include other projects. And other projects, the first one that comes to mind, this would be a separate application, would be the King Street Sidewalk. And that comes to mind. And the other project that comes to mind is the Jerusalem Road Sidewalk. I call these like pipe dreams. It would be great to have them. Let's apply for it. If we got the money, great. That there's been a lot of discussion about King Street. I know at the town meeting, etc. So, but what I'm getting is I need some help. And if somebody wants to work, I will send you the questions and wants to work with me and try and get the separate applications in. I talked to Montana. She said the best thing to do is if you had 2 or 3 projects, submit them individually so they stand alone, they get rated individually, and if they're granted, they're granted, but don't put them all into one application, separate them out. So if anybody wants to help me with, and if there's any other project that you feel is like, wow, why aren't we tackling this? By all means, but it's quite lengthy. There are about 7 questions that I think I've got a good feel after hopefully getting through Elm Street that we can cut and paste some of the general verbiage about how it helps accessibility and connectivity with the schools and helps the elderly and helps the young families, et cetera, and knock all that out. If somebody has a project and they want to feel like we want to go forward, I'm happy to do that, but I need to almost rely heavily on you to help me out filling that application. So again, the downfall is we won't know if it's awarded until the fall. So again, not to deliberate here, we still don't have, I would love to see Elm Street get done. Don't have the numbers on it yet. Don't know what public participation needs to be done in order to make that happen. There's a lot of moving parts. We still have CHP down around the triangle area doing a lot of work. There's sidewalks that need to go in there, or at least maybe not the sidewalk, the curbing that needs to go in there. Brian, you know more of the details, but it's like, if we were to pave that road tomorrow, why would we be paving it and then cutting it up again because the construction of the harbor is not yet completed? So in my view, there still seem to be a lot of moving parts over there, but I'm 100% supportive of Elm Street moving forward. I know I just talked a lot there, so I'll open it up. Ralph.
Well, just quickly, the latest I have on what's going to happen with the Cohasset Hospitality Partners condominium is that the curb will be installed. The curb is really on Margin Street, where the original driveway for Cohasset Harbor Inn need to be installed. And what I had heard through Ted Lubitz, who's along with George McGoldrick is responsible for that project, is that they will try to do that, I think, by August. So that will be done. So the curb will be done. The other big question was, how about the building itself and what has to be done? And the question was things like concrete and ironwork. And he said they intend to actually have that place closed in by August. So a lot of it will be done by August insofar as Elm Street is concerned. So anyway, that's the most I have, but those are direct from the people who are actually running the project.
Okay. So technical question, Brian, as far as construction goes, is if the curbing is in place around the condominiums over there, is that pretty much like the line in the sand? I've been in the construction business. We need to have curbing in before we put the paving in, or we're putting the paving in and then relying on CHP to go in there and cut into the paving and put the curbing in. What's the
no,
construction process?
You're right. The curbing would need to be set around the entire perimeter of that, and then the paving comes right up to that. Curbing
Right.
set in concrete.
So has that been made clear that, where this project is in the line? We don't have a time frame on it yet, but the curbing, it sounds like it's been relayed, and Ralph said it's going to be in by August. So it sounds like
So,
that message.
yeah,
has
the
been
only
sent.
thing I don't know is, so the entirety of the perimeter, I don't know that the contractor would reset the curbing around the entire perimeter of the site. I think the area that Ralph is talking about, and I think the area that they'll probably agree to, is that new curbing on the Margin Street side and the installation, but the remainder of it would need to be raised and reset by a town contractor, I would think. And
Okay.
so you have, space constraints and kind of coordination constraints with the project and they have said that they will get out of the way for any work we need to do in there. But so that's one thing. The other thing is I wouldn't want to pave or have a new surface on the road and have, Jersey barriers or other things kind of dropped on it.
I agree. Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, with that time frame, which is new and maybe optimistic, I don't know if it's optimistic or realistic or conservative. I think we're likely looking at, next spring for Elm Street rather than the fall.
Okay. So, and personally, I would support that. And given all of the moving parts, let's do it right the first time, and do it once and do it right. And if there's a little bit of a delay, so be it. And who knows, maybe there's some grant application money that we find out about that by then. Paul, back.
So I think I agree with you 100%, Jay.
Paul, you might just sorry you when you logged off and logged back on, you might have missed Brian saying that no guarantees, but it might be more best suited to have Elm Street in the spring or early summer of 2024.
That's just what I was going to say. I think we'd be all more comfortable getting it done right, which I think there's a general consensus on. Is I think we're better off really at this point looking at FY24.
Right.
And then doing it right. And CHP is sealed up. So that's just a thought.
Yep. Well, it seems like that might be the more acceptable time frame. Okay. So just I guess to step back, Brian, looking back at the paving plan for 2023, let me maybe share my screen a little bit here. I know the other kind of heavy hitter here was Beechwood. So, again, looking at that Beechwood and Elm Street, were the heavy hitters there. What's the update on Beechwood? Is that I know it needs to get done and it's in the mixes, and I think we're all supportive of that. What's the status on that, given everything going on?
So we had the contract regular progress meeting this morning. So they probably they'll be complete and out of Dodge by end of June. Just as far as the specific contract work, the main line should be complete within 2 weeks, and then they'll be going back doing the house services. but they'll be complete with that project by June. So if you add 90 days of settlement period, we could do it in late fall, maybe push to spring, but it's queued up right now for fall timeframe. That's Beechwood and Mill Lane.
All right. But so you just mentioned that 90-day settlement period. Obviously, in construction, and you need that settlement period. We commonly stick to that, or try to stick to that.
I would say it's the minimum. I mean, I'd say
Minimum.
best
Okay.
practice is to go through a winter, and
Well,
it's like
yeah.
North Main Street. You're driving on a crappy trench that everyone hates, but the finished product, having gone through a settlement of winter, is better.
Yeah.
It's it's settled.
Well, I'm sure you get these phone calls on a daily and emails on a daily basis, and my road sucks, and why isn't this paved, and why isn't that? So, if the course of action or best practice is to wait a full winter period for settlement, freeze and thaw, then I think that's against something to strongly consider. Now, so I guess we'll know more as the months go on here. Having said that, if we look at that plan, which I'm going to stop screen sharing here, A, opens up some monies, and B, allows for some prioritization. I think Brian, is it safe to say we need to start looking at some other projects here that could be bumped up and moved up?
So the list that we've asked Edwards, and I think we talked about how busy they are, that we've asked them to price out the next 2 years of paving on our list. So
yeah. So they have 23 and 24, FY 23 and 24.
That's right.
All right. And you said you had a little bit of feedback on some numbers, but not all of them. If you could share that, that would be awesome. So that at our next meeting, or even before that, I can share that with the group to see what the reality is of the numbers here, and then kind of do a little voting prioritization of see what we can move around and move forward.
I mean, I would say 100% definitive. We need to do margin, which includes a piece of Atlantic and Smith Place this season. Those are,
yes.
There's no holdups, and there's some preliminary work we need to do with maybe some water services that are already in, it's in the works and should be done shortly, but those are in place. The other ones have a question mark, whether it's settlement or funding or, design.
Gotcha. And just looking, so I think nobody has an issue with any of that. And so, okay.
And let me just bring this up, just, we don't need to talk about it or anything, but just in terms of, rapid degradation of roadway over the winter, South Main Street has been on the list, and it's starting to look really poorly too. So that, that area may be, if it goes through another rough winter, that may be subject to moving up. But there's some design considerations with sewering out there and things like that. So we might be at a point where we do, a temporary treatment. Like when I say that, maybe a 1 lane or a trench mill and overlay or something like that, just to make it drivable.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's another road that's getting a lot of say complaints and potential wheel claims.
Yeah. Well, is that, I don't know how many of you follow social media and follow Facebook 143, but there was a posting there. What's that?
I said I don't find it. It's not. It's better to stick to the plan rather than be reactive. We'd spend the whole.
No, I agree with you. But I do follow it, unfortunately. And there was a posting there about an individual looking to get a citizen lawsuit together against the town to fight it about sidewalks and accessibilities and ADA compliant, etc. And I wanted to chime in, but I thought it was right before the election, and it was thrown in there for political purposes, in my view, that didn't really go anywhere. And I remained quiet on it. If anybody knows that, any you see me around town, I'm definitely a person who is supportive of ADA. My son's in a wheelchair, and there's many places in this town, and almost every restaurant in this town that I can't even go to with my son because it doesn't have a wheelchair ramp to get in the front door. So, yeah, if anyone's aware of it, certainly I am. But anyway, so I know I don't have a lot more to discuss. It sounds like we're making some progress here. We're coming up with some details. Getting some firm numbers would be great. It sounds like we've got some projects that are, hey, look at it's May 25th now, and these projects, it's summertime, and this is the summer paving time, and got to get it done before the fall. Some projects may move here and there. I would again message to everybody, look at those, look at 2023, 2024, and even look out to 2025, although we don't have cost estimates. And when you're driving around town, do a little prioritization within yourself and bring those to the table for our next meeting. If you want to jot them on paper and email them to me personally, then great. There's no guarantee, that all the work's going to get done and everything is going to get shuffled. There are a lot of moving parts to every project. There's design consideration, construction consideration, etc. So, we have to be realistic. I think the goal of this committee is to move things forward, and it looks like by the minute here, literally, things are being moved forward, and we're learning about new paving opportunities, etc. So I don't know Frank, I haven't heard your voice yet, and Ralph, we'll get to you next. Go ahead, Frank. I see your hand raised.
Yeah, just thinking about the grants you were talking about putting in applications for. I know we're running tight on time for that because they're due next week. But I think speaking of the ADA compliance, looking at the TEC report, they mention accessibility ramps in there, and the section that they have about that, their estimated cost of that is just shy of $106,000 to make the entire town ADA compliant as far as sidewalk ramps go. Sounds really low, but I mean, if that's accurate, I think it'd be worth putting in. I'd be happy to help put in a grant for that, because that does not seem like a lot of money to make the entire town sidewalks ADA compliant, at least the existing ones.
Yeah.
And then it would allow us to put in more crosswalks, which is something that I think we really need, especially around town. And Brian had mentioned last time that we can't put in crosswalks where there aren't ADA compliant ramps, which I understand makes sense, but I haven't seen any that have ADA compliant ramps on both sides. I mean, there's maybe one or two that have them on both sides, but some of them just go literally into curbs or into dirt on one side and then into a sidewalk or a driveway on the other. Kind of two different issues there. I think, if we put in the ramps, then we have one less excuse to not put in crosswalks.
Yeah, so you're right, Frank. There are a lot of crosswalks. Well, there are a lot of crosswalks that aren't compliant, but those that are kind of installed in the past prior to the regulation now is that if you touch a sidewalk or a crosswalk, you need to make it compliant. It's not that you can't maintain paint on a pre-existing, condition, which is a lot of them around town.
Right. And there isn't state or federal funding for that has to be picked up by the.
Yeah, there is. We've applied for them, and I think that the one-stop grant that Jay had talked about, it includes a myriad of different funding sources.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would be a potential fourth project, but I'm happy to move that forward. It's a great suggestion, Frank, and $110,000 doesn't seem like a lot, and the cost estimates in there. I was in over my head with one grant application, so 4 will be fun.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to help. And one other one I think would be number 5 in priority, and we probably wouldn't have time for. But there's, I was out watering my flowers this morning in the front of our house, and I had probably 50 kids walk up Pleasant Street to go to school every morning. And there's 2 sections. One is like 4 houses, and another is 1 or 2 houses that just suddenly don't have sidewalks. So kids are walking in the middle of the road. One is right by town. It's the bottom block, just stops having a sidewalk and then does again at Cushing Street. So I think that under the auspices of getting kids to school safely could justify a grant for that. And then again, at the top of Pleasant, the sidewalk just ends. So 50 yards left, kids have to walk in the road. And there, again, tons of kids walk up the street to get to work. It's the whole town and the whole hillside neighborhood. But that's,
Well, that it's a great point, and that's something that when we talked about the setting of the criteria, which we didn't talk about this time, but we did a couple of meetings ago, as far as connectivity going from point A to point B, where if we've identified an area of a roadway or a portion of town that the sidewalk ends and then suddenly picks up again, that in my view should be bumped up right to the top of the list to
Mhm.
say, hey, this is an area that needs to be addressed, within the next year. And so that becomes a priority of the sidewalk committee as we relay that to the select board.
Sure.
So yeah, those particular areas of town, Paul, I'll get to you in a second. Those
Take your time.
particular areas of town, come to the next meeting and where we can deliberate on that a little bit more, and let's start to prioritize all of this. Ralph. Oh, did you have any more, Frank? Sorry.
no, that's it for me. Yeah, thanks.
Just again, on the money issue, and this one's more for Paul than anybody else. And that is we know that we only have $500,000 a year allocated for roads right now. We have 300,000 that comes out of the capital budget and about 200,000 comes out of Chapter 90. We really need to have the operating budget of the town or the capital budget bumped up so that we actually end up with about $1 million, Paul. If we can do it, we need to do that for 2024 for sure. Then we will have a guaranteed ability to actually do the roads at least. So that's my suggestion. If you can pull that off, that would be helpful. But 500,000 is really too small right now.
Can I answer that, Jay?
Yeah, yep, please, because I can't.
All right. No, Ralph, it's spoken about earlier. We get this, and I mentioned it to Brian. This board's on an ambitious path to get things done. And so that's what I asked Brian, is to come up with something that really is not within reason. I would suggest, getting something even more than comfortable, and then we come up with what we can. I mean, I think the board's already looking at, I'm hearing a figure of about $1 million.
Yeah.
But it's going to be applied to the stabilization fund, is presenting what we need to get Cohasset to be the Cohasset that we all want and need it to be. So that comes up for the select board. I can't speak for that. I think things are looking favorable, and everybody's ready. We've moved things along at a snail's pace. We have a limited amount of time, and that's why the charge in this committee is limited, is so we can get things done. And it's not against, we can always recharge the committee, but it's time to stop being committed out, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I do suggest is coming up with, and I mentioned this to Brian and Jay, is that we come up with a figure that we can work with that's going to get things done successfully. And to Frank's point about that is prioritizing. I liked your point earlier about standing in a circle, Cohasset. Where are the kids? What's important? I do know Pleasant very well. That sidewalk is reminiscent of Jerusalem Road. It degrades into nothing as you're going downtown towards Ripley and going up. It's not in the greatest shape, and that's a school bus area. Wish list. You could do Cushing all the way down a pond. But it's there is grass in between. But I agree with that, and I agree with you, Jay, that it's prioritizing where is safe and how do we make it safe. And Ralph, I think that there should be an ask as to what this committee and DPW feels comfortable with.
Right. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that there's an amount of money which is operating budget, which should go on and should not require an override. Stabilization requires an override. So what I'm saying is that you need to have enough money in the budget to do the roads on a regular maintenance basis for the next 20, 30 years, whatever that number is. And I can agree, maybe we should figure that out. But secondarily, you have a stabilization fund, which does those things which don't have to get done every 20 years. And that's an override question. So I wanted to separate those two things out. And that's the one I'm trying to make the point. Okay, that's all.
Well, in looking at that list, what I saw and going up and down is once we get with what we have to, I think, Brian, you chime in, please, is that those costs go down. You know, once everything is done, then we do have a rolling maintenance fee and budget. And yes, I would agree, is bringing that to town meeting and applying, you know, putting more in the budget. If I'm answering your question correctly.
I think that's it, basically, just a budgeted amount and then there's an override amount. They're separate things. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Given so the moving parts here a little bit, I do want to schedule the next meeting. Why we have almost everybody on the committee here. Again, it seems to lunch hour, give or take a few minutes, seems to work for everybody. How does Brian? Well, you'll have some numbers for us that you could email or this afternoon or tomorrow. Maybe not have Elm Street, but should we shoot for a meeting next week, like next Wednesday or Thursday? Let's keep this move. I'd like to get a meeting in before the grant goes forward. So I would say Wednesday or Thursday around lunchtime. How do people's calendars look on Wednesday? That would be Wednesday,
Wednesday's better
31st.
than Thursday for me.
What's that?
Wednesday's better than Thursday. Oh, I can't actually do Wednesday.
We're probably not going to get everybody to agree on a time. How does? I can't do two. How does Wednesday look for everybody? Tuesday's out for me.
I can do Wednesday or Thursday.
How about
Thursday.
Brian? What's best for you?
Yeah, I'm good both days at this time.
What about Wednesday at 11?
I could do Wednesday at 11.
That's fine.
Does Wednesday at 11 work for everybody? And we may not even go till noon. Ralph? You're muted. Wednesday at 11, does that work for you, Brian?
Yes.
Now, we need to have 5 people on for a full quorum if we're going to vote. If anybody can't make it, totally understand. Just let us know so we don't have to cancel the meeting. Ralph, does
No,
Wednesday
Wednesday
work for you?
Yeah. Your Wednesday or Thursday works for me. Yeah.
Wednesday at 11 seems, sorry, Tori, but does Wednesday at 11 work? And Tori, if anybody can't make it, please just email me your prioritization or areas of concern, and I will raise that voice for you so that it can be heard to the whole group. And you know, let's try and focus in using the next meeting. I'll give you an update on the grants. In the meantime, I may reach out to a couple of you. Anybody wants to participate on the King Street Sidewalk application, if you think it's worthwhile, and the time and energy that we're going to put into it, let me know, and I'm happy to move that forward. And in the meantime, let's look at that paving plan, prioritizing. That's going to be my key word. I'm wake up in the middle of the night, even though I stumble when I keep talking prioritization of the list and in areas of concern. And let's talk about that again on Wednesday. So Wednesday at 11. Anybody want to bring anything else up we haven't talked about, or what we should be talking about on Wednesday?
I'm going to cut out because I got to run into a meeting. So Wednesday's fine.
All right. Wednesday at 11. I will send a message to Carol if she's still on, and so that we can get the Zoom link and the announcement on the webpage and everyone's aware of it.
I will have to get that out tomorrow before 11 because the days that we have off do not count as the 48 hours.
I'm gonna see exactly. I got you. I'm gonna send you something this afternoon
Sounds great.
with an agenda. Well, you already know it, so you can Wednesday at 11, the 31st, and I'll send you a quick agenda.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, everybody. Again, if you can't make the meeting, just send me a list of your issues, and we'll go from there. And reach out to a couple of you in the meantime.
Sounds good. Jim, planning there.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.